Welcome to Discover Indie Film. I'm your host, Jeff Howard, and I'm pretty honored to have filmmaker and, boy, I don't even know what maybe I got Fr3deR Taylor on Zoom. Hey, Frederick.
How are you doing, my friend?
I'm good. I'm really excited to have Frederick on the podcast because he made a film called Pre-Existing Freedom that came to the Sherman Oaks Film Festival in 2021, and he took home a unique award for a unique film because he submitted Pre-Existing Freedom as a documentary. God, it's such a compelling documentary. It really captures what COVID in 2020 was like and what isolation was like. But there's an element of documentary to it. There's an element of performance art to it. And Frederick is so compelling on screen that we created a kind of cool award, if you ask me, outstanding performance by an individual in a documentary, which of course normally documentaries don't have a performance, but yours did, and so it just made sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still explaining it to people. You know, you gave me an award. It's a trophy. It sits, on my shelf, and people see it and they look at it and they're like, "What is that? What does that mean?
What does that mean?
What is that?" But you know what that is and what that means? That means the world that we live in today. Documentary is not your grandfather's documentary anymore. And the world's extraordinarily complex. And we've got to factor in all of this new media into our existence. Once upon a time long ago, there were only three major networks, or you went to the movie theater, or you listened to what was on the radio, or you had UHF, and that was about it. But you couldn't really respond to the things that you were experiencing. There was no comments or anything. Like maybe you could write a letter to the station or something like that. But the world now is just, it's changed. And so this immediate response to things, commentary, has sort of raised the game. So the attempt with this film was to be a part of that zeitgeist of commentary as you're experiencing, as you're watching. And over the past 20 years, reality television has cannibalized documentary to a certain extent as well, where you're like, is it real or not? I don't know. Maybe I can't tell anymore. And to the younger culture, they don't even think about it. It's no big deal to them. Some of their heroes don't even exist. They're just virtual.
Yeah. For like you said, it's about 20 years, I guess, with reality.
Oh, yeah.
And I've tried saying, like at hangouts with friends or dinner parties, I've tried saying there's a difference between unscripted and produced. Like and
they can't tell it. They don't know what you're talking about.
It's completely produced. There's probably 3 or 4 levels of producers controlling every element. There's nothing real about it. There's nothing. It's as fictional as a scripted show.
Sure. Exactly. I mean, we've turned fictional people into real people. I mean, the Kardashians who come from California. I mean, we act like they're real people. They're not real people. They're created. They're fake. They're homogenized. Pete Davidson right now is drowning in his tears because Kim broke up with him, and he doesn't understand that was not real. That was not a relationship.
The relationship wasn't real. He was just another good way to boost the views and boost the likes and clicks.
Absolutely. And then when that was no longer useful, it was over. The end.
Absolutely.
Moving on. Same thing for her previous husband. I mean, you knew if he keeps acting crazy, she gonna leave him, and he kept acting crazy, and now she gone.
Yeah, no, it's and yeah, I don't know. I'm one of those people. Before we started recording, we talked about people who put their heads in the sand, and I gotta say, as far as that kind of content goes, my head is so in the sand. Like I walk around and I'll say, I'm so proud I don't know what Kylie Jenner looks like. Like if I was in line behind her in the supermarket, I actually wouldn't know because, I've tried to not know, but like I know what all the Kardashians look like because they just consumed us.
Absolutely. I take my head in and out of the sand on them. And I'm always looking at it from the technical aspects as well. Like, what is making this work? What is making this go? It's the imagery, it's the cutting, it's the production value, it's the flow of it as well. At times it's very hypnotic. It completely feels like propaganda. It's manipulation of the mind. And for me, it's like, can manipulation of the mind be a good thing? Can we create content that helps to influence people in a positive direction? And I think the answer to that is yes. And so some of the answers in being able to do that are with some of these other people that do some of the weird crackpot stuff as well. So you say, hey, I like how that's being done or structured technically, but I want to put in something that has, deeper meaning or some core value elements, and then see what happens. And that's a part of what pre-existing freedom is. I mean, it's making a statement. Sometimes it's overt, sometimes it's covert, sometimes it's subtextual, sometimes it's totally in your face, sometimes it's just super subtle. It's very private and quiet moments as well. It's all of the it's all of the above. I mean, there's some haunting elements in it as well. And so it tries to lean into, the fear, the anxiety, as well, that we all go through and that we've all been through, as well. And I think that it's operating more in that space of performance art, or like kind of New York style 60s, 70s kind of, New York performance art as well. That's where a lot of the inspiration comes from. There's a really great piece, you can see it on the internet, of Yoko Ono in the 60s, even before she met John Lennon. She does this piece where she sits up in front, and you may have seen it. She sits up in front of a room full of people, and everybody gets to come up and cut a piece of her clothing off, until, they're, almost disrobing her on stage. And it's a fascinating piece of performance art, and it really gives you an idea of how people think. I mean, the women that come up, they politely cut something off in an area of her clothing that's dignified, and then here come the guys, and they're trying to sexualize her and cut off something so they can get a good look at her. As well. It's an extraordinarily powerful piece. And the thing that I love about it too is, Yoko Ono is Japanese. And this particular piece of performance art is happening in Western culture. And she really understood the power of her indigenous self in the face of Western culture.
As a Japanese female.
as a Japanese woman. Exactly. So a part of pre-existing freedom is just that. It's like, how do I harness this part of myself? And it be very self-aware about it, but I'm not calling attention to it. The viewer is, in their, when they're trying to engage with it, because, so many people say all the time, I don't see color, I don't see race, I don't see. So, we all see these things. We should see these things. And then from there, we process them and we put them into categories, and we should put them into very positively charged categories, that we can be enlightened. I mean, I've sat in synagogue with my friends that are Jewish and listened to a rabbi and learned something about life and how to be a better person. Those are the things that are important, it's not that we've lost them in our society. We've never found them. We've spent over 250 years just running around talking about we're the greatest country in the world and not really applying it to culture, because there isn't one here, because the one that was here we wiped away. There is nothing that is adaptable from the original indigenous culture for us here, except this sort of underground weird movement where people are, being very hippie or whatever, but it's not a part of everyday culture. And that's a shame, and it should be. And even the cultures that have come here, the indigenous cultures that were already here, Latin culture, African culture, the Jewish heritage, as well, to name a few, they rarely get to be a part of the discourse of everyday life. unless they're being commercialized, and homogenized. But they just can't exist just in and of itself. And that's a part of what pre-existing freedom was trying to do. It was trying to just exist. And that's pre-existing freedom. It's essentially, as well, that we all have the right to be here and we all have the right to exist and to project and be our best selves. But we live in a society that rarely allows us the opportunity to do that. We're supposed to wake up every day thinking about money, power, success, attention. How many hits did I get on my Instagram last night, and all this
and can I afford housing and food, and then maybe if I got those things handled, I'll care about my neighbor,
maybe,
and then maybe if my neighbor's all right, I'll care about people I haven't met. But that's a big one.
That's a reach. That's a
culture.
Reach.
Yeah, in a culture that's been sold, from the beginning. I was going to say, so you're talking about pre-existing freedom, which I love, but on this podcast, I always like to go back in time. Mm-hmm. Tell me about your upbringing. What are the things that led you into being this kind of artist?
Total lunacy. Like, people forget the turnkey moment in this society that was the civil rights era. Like, people just don't understand history, and that the transcendental leap that we made in this culture from the 1950s through the 1960s to get to the 70s, we became a completely different society. And then I'm a child of that. I grew up in this era being told I can do anything. I can be my best self. We finally had laws that said I could go anywhere I wanted to go, do whatever I wanted to do, be educated in the way that I wanted to be. The court system was there to protect me. People were marching and fighting for things, and not just for African Americans, but for, women's rights, women's reproductive rights as well, immigrant rights, LGBTQ rights. I mean, I just, free Nelson Mandela. I grew up in this era of this really strong sense of, and justice for all, and so that's
pretending we were already there.
Pretending we were already there. Exactly. So I bought into the system. So I said, I'm going to be as smart as I can. I'm going to be educated. I'm going to pay attention to the teachers. I'm going to be a good citizen. I want to be somebody, and I'm going to project my best self. And then suddenly I'm shot out of a cannon as an adult, and everybody's going like, hey, slow down. Wait a minute. We didn't really mean that. We prefer for you to be kind of over here, compartmentalized. You're not here to be in a leadership position. You're not here to be someone that has a tremendous command of language and education, and you've traveled and you have a master's degree and you taught college before you were even 25 years old. That doesn't work. That makes us uncomfortable. You are moving into this space where you are categorically a threat. And so as an adult, I saw all these things that were always threatening, where you'd read these stories, unarmed black man killed by the police, Trayvon Martin, or we can just go on and on and on and on and name the names. And I was like, oh my God, they don't want me here. They're not really interested in me. I don't dunk a basketball. I don't score touchdowns. I don't rap, but there's a lot of things that I can do that can make a huge contribution to society and beyond my own culture as well. And so suddenly I became compartmentalized in the underground, where like my friends were, independent radicals, and then they come from all these different backgrounds. And there I am in a room full of Black and brown people and Jewish people and gay people and transgendered people. And I'm like, wow, those are my people. These other people that I was educated by and around, that they just kind of let me hang around them for a while when I was like a kid. Suddenly as an adult, they don't have any real interest in me as well. So I turned into, for all intents and purposes, an intellectual radical. I had no choice. I had no other place to go but into that space.
Right.
So
During your education, you were actually able to flourish more.
right.
And then it was post education, you realized it was either give up a part of yourself
Right.
or maintain yourself and become. By the way, I love the term intellectual. I mean, I wish we had more intellectuals. I wish, boy, there's, I imagine, a big swath of our culture of America that sees intellectual as a negative term.
Oh, completely. It's off-putting. You're the party pooper. You're
Yeah.
gonna spoil everything.
Yeah. Whereas when I was a kid, boy, you'd have an intellectual like Gore Vidal on TV just going on and making perfect sense,
Right.
and completely contradicting the powers that be. And it was I think it was valued, of course, because it was from an old white guy,
But now that society has evolved and it's no longer just an old white guy. It's a young black girl, reading a poem at the inauguration. It's the face of intelligentsia has evolved. And America at times is really, really, really uncomfortable with that. That we now have a generation of bright and intelligent and articulate people of all different backgrounds and all different shapes, sizes, and colors and genders and orientations. And they're ranging in age from 50 something to 5 years old. It's a wave of people. And so now the establishment is like, how do we keep these people out of here? How do we keep these people back? Hey, well, let's take certain types of, educational platforms out of schools. That'll slow the younger people down. Let's not create venues and outlets for these older versions of these people to get their messages out there. Hey, let's pound them into the ground with false information through media. Let's kick them around and disrespect them. That was one of the things that really turned me off. And there's many things that turned me off to Donald Trump, but that was one of the things initially that really did. I was like, why are you getting on a podium and you're just dismissing other people offhand? Like you're just naming names and you're just like you're standing in the schoolyard trashing people. In the beginning, I didn't understand it. And then now I do. Oh my God, there's a great end game with that. Every time somebody comes along that says, hey, I've got something for you that's really great for everybody. And then somebody else can come in and say, no, that guy's an idiot. That guy's a clown, Dr. Fauci, whatever, and just throw in your progressive thought. And then somebody comes in and takes a fire hose to it, all the time. And that's become how we work in society. And recently with this sort of FBI raid of the former president, we see it because suddenly, we can't trash him because he's the trasher. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. He deserves to be kicked around a little bit for this as well. He deserves some criticism for this. But those core people are like, no, like they're treating him like a demigod, and that's not the society that I grew up in. That's not what I was taught or how I was raised. And, for me, yes, I was born on the south side of Chicago. I had aspirational parents that got us out of there. We moved into a white neighborhood in Philadelphia, and there was two families in this white neighborhood that were different from everybody. The Novaks and the Taylors. Do you know what I mean? You know what I mean? And
I completely understand.
Yeah. And that was a profound time in my life. I really saw how the system really works and puts people into categories. And I started to see who's on my side or who's got my back versus who's not paying too much attention to what I have to do or what I have to say as well. And that's something that I've carried with me my whole life too. I don't kid myself about where my bread is buttered either, and those are some important self-actualizations to have. And again, that makes me uncomfortable with certain people and makes me a threat because I support certain cultural groups that are frowned upon by the so-called dominant cultural group as well. Because there are certain people from the dominant cultural group that come into my universe and like, oh, we really like you. You walk, talk, speak well. You're so bright. You're so intelligent. You're articulate. Don't you want to be on our team? You can sit right here next to Ben Carson on the bus. And I'm like, I don't want to sit next to Ben Carson on the bus. I don't want to sit next to Candace Owens on the bus. They're not my people. I don't know those people. That's not how I roll. And that makes people uncomfortable as well, because I don't play ball with them in spite of the fact I seem to have the toolkit to be able to be in their universe. And I said, I owe more to, humanity than to just one small group of people. And they don't feel that way. They think they only owe something to one small group of people and bleep humanity.
Yeah, and it strikes me that you believe in truth.
Correct.
And something I wanted to contribute to what you were saying was, like, with those powers that be, they are literally trying to protect ignorance. And like with Trump, with the trolling and the criticizing stuff, they're protecting ignorance. Like, if someone tells you that this country has made errors in the past, we're gonna turn that into a bad word called critical race theory, and we're gonna try to ban it, and we're gonna protect the ignorance that this country's always been perfect, the ignorant view. And as much as people might pay someone to do it, you're not interested in promoting ignorance.
I can't. I can't stand on that. It's not even moral ground. That's not ground. It's quicksand that just sinks to hell. Like, I mean, it's ridiculous for me to think that is a reflection of anything about who I am and then what I have been taught and what my values are. My values are, my grandmother was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, and decided that she wanted to go to college. And it was the late 1930s, early 1940s, and we were at war. And she said, I don't care. I'm moving to the North and I'm going to college. And I'm going to send my children and my grandchildren to college too. And I was that grandchild. That's what I come from. I can't abandon that. What if my grandmother had not made that sacrifice? And this also applies to other people's cultures as well. And I think one of the ones that's the prime example of that are people of Jewish heritage. When you listen to them and you sit down and you listen to their stories and they talk about their parents, their grandparents, their great-grandparents, and what they went through, you're like, holy moly, you wouldn't even be here if they hadn't made some huge sacrifice in the face of horrible, unimaginable circumstances. I went to a survivor, if there are fewer and fewer survivors that are around, anytime I can go to one and listen to someone speak, it's powerful. Now you're listening to survivors talk about, I was in a camp in Romania and I was 5 years old. And this person telling you this story is old.
I just went to the funeral earlier this year of my friend's father, who had been born in Czechoslovakia, Jewish, spent, I think, 5 to 7 years of his youth in a work camp, because he was old enough to be useful as free labor. And he passed away in his 80s after, just an amazing life story.
Amazing.
And I mean, I'm of Jewish heritage, so when you say that, my great grandfather moved out to Anaheim, California, as a shoemaker for the people working at the oil fields. And the Klan marched down the street and lit fires on their lawn. And God bless her, my grandmother thought it was a parade. She didn't realize what they were about, and her parents didn't explain it to her. So I was told this story of, like, I thought it was a parade. Turned out it was the Klan. But they didn't chase us out because they needed the boots my father made. They were only, but anyway, so thank you for including that, because I may not be an observant person, but I know where I come from.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's important, and that's essential. And so that brings me back to what we're talking about and why we're here today. And we're doing things because of these unique backgrounds that the society with which we live doesn't want to happen. They want to erase history. So a guy like me and a guy like you aren't going to get together on a podcast and talk about them behind their back. This is what they don't want.
Yeah, and point out that they're lying to us, point out that they're promoting ignorance.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. They want us to be a couple of development execs at Marvel.
Yeah,
That's what they want.
in which one out of every, oh, I don't know, 30 superheroes will be diverse, I guess.
Exactly. And they want us to play along and play this game. And then every time we come into the Monday morning meeting and we say, we'd really like to have a superhero that's of a, Hasidic heritage. Can we do that? No, that's not going to happen. Can we have like a black? No, that's not going to happen. That's what they want. And then they'll just punt, years, decades, never getting the opportunity to do anything. It was just like they kicked Jewish people in this business into the shadows for decades, even though they were making a massive contribution to Hollywood. But did we make films where we discussed them or talked about the Jewish heritage or whatever and have Jewish heroes and all kinds of no. I mean, Hollywood wasn't even really making Jewish heritage biopics. It was such a big deal when Spielberg made Schindler's List.
It was, and honestly, I think a lot of those executives were of Jewish descent and had that lesson from the Holocaust of we've got to have the lowest profile in the world. We don't even want people.
Oh, exactly. And that's why they do what they do to us. That's why you can get choked out for, a $20 bill in Minnesota, is because it's to send a message to the rest of them to say, hey, what's happened to you? You don't do what we say or what we want. And it does work. It is effective. It does scare people. I have been in rooms with other African Americans and we've had these conversations and some of them are just scared. They're like, I'm not doing that. I'm not saying anything. I'm not going to get out there in March. I'm not going to cause a scene. I'm making $450 a day, working on season 4 of Ozark. I'm not ruining that. I got these bills to pay. I got this house. I got this mortgage. I got, and they get you trapped, in that game, in that cycle.
Yeah. And they people are convinced that you can't keep the job and the house and everything. Exactly. And Saturday morning comes along, you could actually go out and march. And you're not going to lose your job, probably.
No. You're not. There's enough mechanisms in place.
It's the dominant culture wants. Yeah, my God. I mean, the dominant culture is now talking about. I mean, we're seeing what happened to women with the Supreme Court, and they're going to come after LGBTQ culture next, and try to take marriage away, probably.
Exactly.
And it's like, weren't you? And they're literally just saying, we were happier when you were in the closet. So could you go back, please?
Right, and take the trans people with you because we were happier when we didn't know they existed. It was like Native Americans, trans people, or these two groups that people are like, we don't even want to talk about them being alive. It's crazy stuff. And, and the Roe v. Wade thing is just, it's a lot of saber waving in order to scare everybody about all of these other issues. Whether those laws will pass or not is almost irrelevant. They just want to polarize the progressives into saying, oh gosh, if we keep talking, they'll take all of our rights. They've got the power. No, they don't. They're all those people are incompetent. It's obvious that they're incompetent. They're just riding on the gas fumes of ignorance, of this core that is able to just make noise into the echo chamber that's our society, and we as progressives, we're just too polite sometimes. And I've learned this skill. I've gotten tired of being polite. I've just, I've stopped the show on some conservatives because they get rude. And they cross the line and they'll punch you in the nose and think you're not going to hit back. They think progressive people are weak and they misunderstand what strength is. But sometimes you got to turn around and scrap a little with them.
Yeah, and they're so intellectually dishonest. Right. The move I despise the most is the looking at you and saying, well, you promote tolerance, so you should tolerate my intolerance. Why won't you tolerate my racism or my homophobia? Why can't I? You were supposed to accept everyone, so damn it, accept me, because don't I have the right to be an asshole?
Exactly. It's like a Pee Wee Herman sketch. It's like, I'm rubber, you're glue or something. I know you are, but what am I? I mean, like, you're literally communicating with them on that level, like you're in a schoolyard as a child.
It is.
They have no logic behind what they're saying and what they're doing, but they know that they really love football. They know that.
Oh shit, man. I some people from my high school with Colin Kaepernick and whatnot, like when they're like, I don't pay for season tickets to watch that. I'm like, how could that possibly bother you? I would just debate them endlessly. But so wait, I picked up on something. So Chicago to Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to tell me about the move from Philadelphia to Atlanta? Like what led to that? I'm kind of picking up.
You know what it is?
I love this because I'm getting all these amazing points and a little bit of biography in between.
Well, my father is a musician. So moving from Philadelphia to Atlanta it's a Jewish man's fault. It's Clive Davis's fault. So I personally blame Clive Davis for it, because Clive Davis started a little record label that was a arm of Arista Records called LaFace Records. Because he had Babyface and L.A. Reid on his label, because they used to have a group. They were out of Ohio. They were out of that Ohio soul scene of the 70s. They had a group called The Deal, and they were in the 80s. And then that started to kind of fall apart. And then they were going into the producing realm. They were working at Arista with Clive, and Clive was like, yeah, I want to do this thing in Atlanta, and assigned them to it. And they started LaFace Records. And so there was this great migration of Black musicians back to the South in the late 80s. Because Clive was killing it. He was making a bunch of money. He had that Whitney money going on, so he could start a new label, and it was LaFace. And my dad was a musician in Philadelphia. He was teaching music at a small HBCU school called Cheney University, and he said, "Hey, there are some opportunities here in Atlanta," because at the time my dad was also gigging with Philadelphia International Records, which was like all that, McFadden and Whitehead, Sister Sledge stuff, OJ's, Teddy Pendergrass, like all this high-powered R&B soul stuff, which, by the way, a lot of it was written by Jewish people. Like, literally, how do you get the Philadelphia sound? You get a bunch of Jews and a bunch of Black people in a room. That's how you create Teddy Pendergrass. That's how you create McFadden and Whitehead and the OJs. And all that soul train sound, that high energy, 70s soul music. We're like, this is great. I love this. Or it just goes right through you. That's Jewish people and Black people making music together. That is literally all it is, which is amazing. It's amazing. But, that is how we ended up in Atlanta. And then my father started teaching at Georgia State University. And he helped to start the commercial music merchandising program at Georgia State. And then he talked me into, hey, you should come to Atlanta. You should go to graduate school. You can go to graduate school for free if you come to Atlanta. And so he conned me into it. Because who wants to pay for graduate school if you can go for free?
It's a big difference graduating with no debt, that's for sure.
Completely. I graduated with no debt. Right. So I can't get mad at that. And my dad said, where the music business goes, the film business is soon to follow. That's how it works. So he's like, if you come in here now, you'll be on the ground floor of the film business. And lo and behold, he was right. And here we are. And I use that as a springboard to get me to Los Angeles, and started building a career out there. And then Atlanta just turned into a behemoth, and LA was kind of going sideways, and I'm like, I should go back to Atlanta. So, I came back to Atlanta, and then there I was there. And then, of course, got hit with the Scud missile that is Trumpism and all this other madness.
Yeah, I mean, Atlanta is, I've heard Dan Savage refer to the Blue Archipelago as in, like, there's these little islands of blue surrounded by a sea of red.
Completely. Yeah. That's exactly what this place.
But like the Sea of Red is really intense, I imagine,
It is. You
because
can
you have
you can feel
the
it.
Southern pride thing.
Oh yeah, like even you can't pass. Like we could go to a bar or something in the Sea of Red world, and someone's going to come up to you and go, "What are you?"
Yeah,
That's how intense it is because you do not look like you're from the South. And once you started talking, you really don't sound like someone from the South. And what you would be talking about would be this huge trigger, and then you would be sitting next to me. You kidding me? Get out of here. They got something to say to you, you know.
I can
And
imagine. I can
oh,
imagine. No, I get.
they don't like different. They don't like different. They stick their nose in it all the time, and they say inappropriate things and ask inappropriate questions and
Right,
want to
just to
qualify
test
it.
you, right? Just to see if they can get that rise to make sure you're another.
Hmm. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
It's
I
a
think comedian David Cross grew up in, I think, suburban Atlanta. I don't know if you know
yeah,
David Cross, and I
yeah,
recall him in one of his routines. He referred, there's a special type of ignorance in the South. Let's just call it Southern Baptist.
right. Yeah,
and
that pretty much sums it up.
and yeah, everyone who, yeah, I mean, right, they're the people who think Protestants are, or there's veins of Christianity they don't. Oh no, it's Catholicism they don't approve of.
They hate Catholics. They also think that Jesus wasn't a Jew. These people are nuts.
That's right. That's right.
They
You're reminding me.
rationalize that Jesus is not a Jew. They only believe in the Bible and the New Testament, pretty much from John to Revelations is the only thing that they will talk about and think about and follow. Anything that references Jesus as King of the Jews, they're like, get it out of here.
Right. Even though it's in their book. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. They just
And
ignore it.
anything that's in their culture, they assume is also in their scripture, right? Like that.
Yes.
I forget what city it was in the South, but there was the woman who, besides not allowing, she had a banquet hall, and besides not allowing gay couples to have receptions there, she wouldn't allow a mixed race couple
Right.
to have a reception there. And she said, "Well, it's in the Bible," and it took her own pastor to tell her, actually, it's not in the Bible
Right.
that black people, white people can't get married. And she's like, "Oh, I would have sworn it was in there."
That's what they operate on. Like they soar with ignorance and they're completely and totally comfortable with that. And they never feel the need to find, empirical evidence to back up anything. Like they don't think it's necessary, but they require it from you. you know, if you want to talk about, your Jewish heritage or, what your lineage has gone through in the past, they expect you to come with charts and numbers. You got to back it up. They're not going to take your word for it.
Yeah.
They'll say, oh, that Holocaust thing, that was made up. They'll say anything. They'll say anything. I mean, like they say things to me all the time. They're just like, well, people of color, they have more moisture in their skin, or they say the stupidest things. They'll come up to me and say, you black guys, you can build more muscle faster at the gym than us white guys. I don't know why you guys can run so fast. It's crazy. I don't understand that. But like, oh my God, really? This is what you're focused on? Not like curing cancer, And while they're standing in line at a fast food place with type 2 diabetes and skyrocketing blood pressure, wondering why their friends are stroking out at 63. They're crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And their favorite athletes are black. Their favorite musicians are black, and yet they still don't have
Don't get
that.
it. They can hate your guts and dance to your music. It
Yeah.
is crazy. I don't get it.
So that's so life in Atlanta. So you did do some time in LA and then back to
Right.
Atlanta. And were you always pursuing visual arts and spoken word and things like that?
Yeah, it's just been my thing from the beginning. Even as a kid, I just really loved words and had a very high literacy great, or the ability to speak words, write words, things like that. And then I love to draw, paint, make music. And then the first time I got exposed to film was in like 7th grade. I made this box camera out of a shoebox. And then I fell in love with the ability to record images. And then by the time I was like 16, I got my first camera, and then I was hooked forever. And it's just been that ever since. And then I was just a child of media. I just grew up, MTV was my jam. And I was obsessed with music artists that could reach beyond their own core cultural group as well. So I was always fascinated with artists that could connect with other people as well. And I think one of the first songs I was ever really fascinated about is a song called "The Greatest Love of All," which was first sung by George Benson, who came out of, again, that Philadelphia sound era. But I was shocked. I was like, when someone told me, "Did you know that was written by a Jewish person?" And I was like, no, that's one of the greatest Black songs ever in the world. It was written by a Jewish person. Yeah, he was. "Son of a Preacher Man" was written by a Jewish person.
Crazy. I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great story. A Jewish person wrote it, and they're trying to get Aretha to sing it. And Aretha's like, "I'm not singing that song." And then they give it to Dusty Springfield. It becomes a hit. And then, Aretha gets jealous, and then she records it. And then those versions are on the charts at the same time. But the song was written by a Jewish person, and it's "Son of a Preacher Man," and it's a Jewish person that wrote it. I mean, come on. So these ideas about who we are as people and culture, they fracture. It's a bunch of malarkey, We're constantly giving to each other, I mean, I have Jewish kids that come through my office and work here, and we have these fascinating discussions because, the discussion of like, eyes, nose, lips, or whatever, and like, physical features and stuff like that. And I always tell the Jewish kids, shut up. You look great. What are you talking about? Like, stop comparing yourself to Aryan people. I said, look at me. What am I going to do about it? This doesn't wash off. You learn to love it and be proud of it. And I didn't realize that I could have an impact on young Jewish kids as far as self-identity is concerned and love of self. And I was blown away by it. The level of responsibility that we have for, each other. And when I first started in the business, when I started like 18, 19, 20 years old, the people that were helping me out when I was running around on set didn't know my bleep from my elbow. Old Jewish people. "Hey, kid, come over here for a second. Let me talk to you." Like, they were the ones that were like giving me the info and the intel that I needed. One of my mentors was a guy named Hank Garfield. He was the sound man on Hill Street Blues. He was like 3,000 years old. And he would always give me advice on set for things. And then he would always say, all those things are really important, but one of the most important things you should remember is you should take a little Metamucil every day before work. It's going to work wonders for you. I know you don't believe me now. Someday you're going to thank me for that. Metamucil. Now I think about Hank every day because I'm taking Metamucil in the morning, It's hilarious, but it's such a beautiful thing, when people love you for you. And that comes from all people.
Yeah, when people just so concerned for each other as human beings.
Right. Exactly. It makes the world a better place. And I just don't understand why a lot of these bozo conservatives don't get that. They would be so much happier if they just learned to love everybody. And that's all we're asking for.
Yeah. And if they traveled and experienced other cultures and societies. Yeah, I always thought that was one of the most revealing things about Mr. Trump, was that here was a guy, probably actually not a billionaire, never came close to it.
Never was. Exactly.
But for all the money he had, he never went to Europe. He never, like someone with that kind of money is supposed to spend time in Paris, spend time in London, Rome, Berlin, elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And the dude could care less.
Yep. Makes some difference to him.
Maybe a golf course in Ireland, in Scotland. but wouldn't go anywhere where they didn't speak English and just experience it and realize, because that is, I was fortunate to travel and just see how connected we are to the rest of the world, whether you're in Thailand or Vietnam or suburban Germany or Italy. Like, we all have a lot in common.
We do.
Like, I could blindfold somebody in suburban Atlanta, knock them out, wake them up in suburban Germany, and they would not know they're in another country until they noticed all the signs. Yeah. Yeah. So the America number one thing, it's like America is just part of the world.
Just part of the world. It's part of the world, And I've been some places that people, that our former president used to call bleep holes, that I've met some of the most amazing and wonderful people in the world that help to shape and mold who I am as a person. And I wouldn't have traded those moments for anybody. I mean, I've been deep in the heart of Africa in villages. I've sat with Tibetan monks. I've gone to South America, Eastern Europe. I've been out in the middle of nowhere in Romania with Jewish people who they literally still have carriages pulled by horses and are cutting straw in the fields with sickles and stuff like that. When you experience life in that way, it really changes you. I've interviewed the Navajo. I mean, you just start to really have an appreciation for what life is really all about. And again, pre-existing freedom, it was an attempt to try to represent, and create something that everybody can take a look at and get something out of. And feel better about the world in some small way, that it is worth trying to hold on to this precious rock that we all live on, because we're not leaving it anytime soon, in spite of whatever Elon says.
Well, whatever. The dream of having a couple hundred, maybe a couple thousand people on another rock doesn't exactly ensure anything. A surviving an ecological disaster.
Right. Exactly. The best call is to try to make this place the best that it can be. And that's attainable. We have the technology to make this planet wonderful. We have the technology to ensure everybody has clean drinking water. Every child is fed. Every child is educated. Everyone can be protected under the eyes of the law. We have the potential to do that. And we skirt that responsibility every day. I think about, this war in the Ukraine, and I'm just like, what's it for? What are we doing? What's the purpose of this? The amount of people that have died since April. It's just, I can't even believe this is happening, and it's completely and totally disheartening. Because what's the next one? Is it going to Taiwan? Is that where we're headed?
Yeah, and the things Putin's invasion of Ukraine, it's quite a tangent, but I think it's clear. I think it clearly shows that he sensed weakness within Russia that he had to address. So the best way to protect his own power was to attack someone else. Completely. And then rally everyone behind him. Exactly. But we let him get to that point, right? And he knew he could do it with minor repercussions.
Right. He was very involved in manipulating the previous administration as well. And I think he'd been eyeballing the Ukraine, way before the 2020 election, and I think the entire time that the previous administration was in office, he's just saying, yeah, this is going to be great, because I've put them to sleep. Now I'm going to go kick the tar out of the Ukraine and, take Europe's breadbasket. Because that's really all it's all about. It's about clearing out, it's genocidal, clearing out all those human beings and taking all of those resources that are in the ground.
Yeah. It's a criminal syndicate, actually. It's organized crime.
It's absolutely.
It's not a government. It's an organized crime organization. And the guy at the top has one concern, which is, I don't know, it's hard for me to imagine having hundreds of billions and feeling that you need more?
I know. Exactly.
All right, so good to hear you've traveled the Tibetan, all that stuff sounded fascinating. And you also mentioned being on sets and getting the Metamucil advice, which is fantastic. So has your whole life been sort of mixing, educating yourself, and then working in the visual media,
Yes.
or?
That's exactly what it's been. One influences the other, which is kind of crazy. It's very symbiotic now. For a long time it was living this life, and then it was creating the art, and then the art has been created, and I've created enough art and have it at a volume and momentum level that now it influences the world I live in and the universe that I exist in.
And
And
the
now
art was the art were you was it you performing it on camera, or it's
it's
pre-existing one of the earlier experiments with that?
it's all of the above. It's sometimes I'm there, sometimes I'm not. And then this new arm of what I'm trying to do is to bring other artists in as well, where I just want to create an environment and support them and help them and assist them. So I see it on there's three sort of tiers of this. It's behind the curtain, in front of the curtain, or you're just in charge of running the entire stage production for another artist that's out there as well. So that's the big part of what I want my legacy to be. As well. And so I really love Pre-Existing Freedom because, like you said, it's performance art, but it's documentary. And okay, now I want to go a step farther. But can I get more of this? Can I bring in more actors, do more documentary style, real stuff, combine these elements together, and where will I land? That's very exciting as well. So lately I've been sort of overdosing on French New Wave films and stuff like that, and old cutting edge documentaries and things, as I'm continuing to find more and more inspiration. But there's also incredible amounts of inspiration that are just in the news on a daily basis, as well, as people attempt to try to live their lives the best they possibly can, as well. So, and I keep this black and white thing, I just keep thinking in all the time, because it seems to speak a lot deeper than color at times, because I think that people get a little bit too muted with lifelike images, and they're not paying enough attention to what's really going on in front of them. They've watched too many Marvel movies. They've watched too many Tom Cruise movies. So now they don't have the capacity to pay attention to something that's a little bit more precise and finite. And when you take color away, you can only look at blacks and whites and grays. You're forced to pay attention more to what's being said and the context of story as well.
Right, it communicates a seriousness in a way.
It communicates a level of seriousness and urgency, as well, that color right now, the way people think, you just can't get them to go there. They're waiting for the superhero to come flying in and save everything. And you're like, that's not a moral story. There is no Iron Man. Thor's not going to come in and hit everybody with a hammer. It doesn't work like that. Real change comes from these individuals. These individuals are heroes. And so I want to be able to deify some of these people, these characters that are accessible as well. So in Pre-Existing Freedom, there's that shot of me. It's deliberately me against the white wall. There's nothing. The only thing you can do is just see me. So to pull people in to say, that is a human being. That is my identifier that's going to tell me and push me through this story, and he's speaking to me in a way that I completely and totally understand and can get. And then I'm wearing a shirt that says Free Negro on it. So I'm announcing that I'm free. Okay, that's where we're starting with this. I am a free person follow me. It's the Harriet Tubman effect at that point. If you want to see freedom, follow me, and I'm going to tell you a story. And in that one moment when it first comes up, you're like, oh, it's a black guy against the white wall. And then seconds later, poof, that's gone. You're not even thinking about that anymore. The black-white thing's gone. As quickly as I present it, that's how quickly it goes away. That's how powerful truth is in the face of all of these cultural biases. When you said you're Jewish, of Jewish heritage, that's great. Moving on. So I need to know you as a person and as a human being, and your Jewish heritage is great, and I'm willing to have coffee with you and talk about it anytime you want.
Yeah, but yeah, and certainly there is no monolithic culture. I sadly I can name some Jewish people who I shouldn't even bother sharing this, but I know one that moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, and when the guys were marching with tiki torches, he was on their side.
Yeah.
Even though they were chanting "A Jew will not replace us," it still didn't cut his Trumpiness.
I know. I mean,
so saying you're Jewish or saying you grew up Jewish, all it means is I'm not even sure what it means. I'm not sure it means hopefully you're a little aware of where you came from.
Right.
But it's nice. It is a nice luxury to know you got about 4,000 years of history, but you got to focus on the present.
You do. You really do. You've got to be able to move forward, and you've got to be able to find your voice, and you've got to remember to include everybody. And even those that you may not totally immediately get or understand. And, for anyone that has had the opportunity to interact with someone that's transgendered, you really get faced with that. You're like, wow, okay, so what do I say? Like, how do I address them? Or like, what's the proper, You're fighting, doing the work to try to get to a place where you're comfortable, or they're comfortable with you as well. Like, I was purposefully just going through this exercise. I would just interview them, like audio interviews, like NPR style, not because I was necessarily going to do anything with it. I just wanted to learn more about the culture, to be able to be respectful to the culture.
And to know it, because there's so much information and there's so much bull crap. I love to share. I'll share this with you because I think you'll particularly enjoy it. But we had a trans filmmaker in 2019, right before COVID hit, and she was in the lobby of our theater, and our photographer looked at her boots and said, "Oh my God, I love his boots." And I leaned over and I said, "She's a she." And the photographer said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And you know what the woman turned to her and said, "Oh, it's fine. I understand. It's confusing. I'm 6'3" and I have big shoulders, so I totally get it. It's fine." And whenever I hear people like whine about the pronoun wars, I get so angry because I'm like, in reality, you get the wrong pronoun with a trans person and they say, "I understand, but thank you for acknowledging who I am." Like that's all it is. It's not like you'll be thrown in jail for calling a she to referring to his boots. It's not the big deal that the conservative media is trying to sell.
Right. And sell is the operative word there, because sell connects it back to eyeballs and advertising and click-throughs and all this other stuff. And that's really in a big way.
And votes. They're making sure they lock in their votes, because God forbid they vote for their own interests. They got to vote for their hatred of an unknown.
Completely and totally. And they just use it as fodder, to continue their war.
It's an interesting time. Let me ask another pre-existing freedom question.
Sure.
I mean, obviously also isolation and COVID is a big part of it.
Yeah.
Did the whole thing come to you during lockdown?
Yeah, it did. Because what was happening in the early days of COVID, as the numbers were climbing, and we didn't know what to do, and there was no vaccine, and the most you could do was quarantine and wear a mask and stay away and all this other stuff. And you're like, hey, my number could come on. I don't know what's going on with my parents, my friends, the unknown. And when you're in the unknown and you can't go anywhere, you can't do anything, and you can't distract yourself, and you're just sitting with your thoughts in your crazy head, stuff starts happening, you know? And it was a manifestation of that. Like, now, like some people drank, some people smoked a lot of weed, some people hid and cried or maybe read books, or they watched a lot of Tiger King or whatever. For me, none of those things were satisfying me. I wasn't comfortable with any of those things. It didn't fulfill me. It wasn't until I said, I'm going to go get this camera out, and I'm going to drag this camera, and I'm going to shoot against this white wall, and I'm going to start talking. And I'm just going to start shooting all of these images in this empty apartment that I was moving out of because I was in an area that was rioting all the time. And it was crazy. In the building I lived in, half the people were believers and half the people were non-believers. And it was crazy town. And it was really stressful. And I was like, I don't need to be here anymore. And so as I was clearing out my stuff, cleansing, so to speak, these ideas started to take shape. And I lived in a high rise. I was on like the 11th floor, and it was in my best interest at times just to stay there. So I just had a sleeping bag, and I just, it just made more sense. There was no place to go, anything to do. I knew if I stayed in this apartment by myself, clearing it out, I was safe. And then it was the first time I started to feel safe in the middle of a pandemic, and the whole world's going to hell in a handbasket. And Rayshard Brooks was killed, Ahmaud Arbery was killed, and little did we know, just around the corner, George Floyd was going to be killed as well. I just started creating, and I didn't initially know what I was creating. I just knew that I was shooting these images, and I knew that I was shooting me talking. And sometimes the images were mundane. I'm folding clothes. I'm sweeping the floor. I'm walking around this empty apartment. That's all it was. And I was like, what does this mean? And I realized that it doesn't have to mean anything, and it doesn't have to mean anything to me right now. It might mean something to me later. And it released me. So then it became therapy as well. It became extraordinarily therapeutic for me, and it became essential to me personally, moving forward.
Right, because you were documenting, and then it's so skillfully and artfully edited, especially with a lot of footage, historical footage, current footage, like outside the apartment. It comes together so well. Is all the editing your work?
It was mine. I was fortunate enough to be someone that is a very good editor, and I've learned the art of editing, which again is an individual skill exercise I could do on my own. You do it on a computer. And so I had the opportunity to control the film from the beginning to the end. And so, once I started bringing in these third-party images, it really started to take shape as well. And you started to see these cause and effect relationships. And it was like, wow, these things I'm saying right now in 2020, in the middle of a pandemic, here's pieces of media that have been reflecting these things for the past 50 years. That was powerful. It connected me back into something that was extraordinarily important and very, very real. And I thought, well, if it's important to me, it's got to be important to some other people, as well. So this is worth the effort to create and document. And then like a certain amount of the music elements, those are a lot of that music, and those sounds are they're all public domain pieces of orchestral music from like the 20s and the 30s that were recordings of these Eastern European classical music artists and stuff like that, obscure stuff that had that very haunting, context to it. as well that was very appropriate for the piece. And I thought that was fascinating as well. So all of these surprise elements just really started to enter into it. And the spoken word it became essential. It became necessary. It became the only way you could get the thoughts and the feelings, across. There was no other medium to do it in at times, to be able to express it properly and give it the focus and the reverence that it deserved. They were words, and they needed to be spoken. I have some really good friends that are Jewish, and I was just spending some time with a friend of mine who's a rabbi just yesterday, and I was at the synagogue with him, and he loves to talk about the Torah, the Torah, the Torah, the Torah, the Torah, the Torah, and it's the words, it's what's being said, and in times of great sorrow and grief, and it's this: go to the Torah, go to the Torah, go to the Torah, go to the Torah. And that's really stuck with me. And I think that sort of methodology works really well for all of us. Go to the words when you don't know what to say. Go to the words, and find the words that speak to you in a way so you can speak to others as well. So that was one of the other key influencers in it too. So, some of the elements in it aren't overtly racial or cultural. They're sort of subvertly racial and cultural as well.
And
there's a song in there, "The End of Suffering," that you hear in the background at the Rayshard Brooks stuff. Those are two Jewish guys. That music's by two Jewish guys. The Holy Brothers. They're a group. They're a Jewish acoustic group in Los Angeles. They're in their 60s. They've been in the music business forever. And they make these really great Jewish folk infused pop songs. I think they're extraordinary, and they're very talented, and they're very creative. And that was one particular song that was very heartfelt. It sort of wailed, it sort of cried out, and I thought, that would work really well in this film, and it's underneath visuals of Black people, in mourning over the loss of this young man, Rayshard Brooks, at the site where they burned down the Wendy's.
Yeah. And it, you created a time capsule while, capturing everything that was going on, not everything, but capturing what was going on in 2020. But then it universally speaks to all years, all time, because right. You have the archival footage, you're bringing in these other elements. Do you plan to do any similar pieces?
I do. I want to expand it. The funny part about it is it's like I've only used some of the footage that I shot during that particular time period. I've got all of this other stuff in a vault that I want to, now it's 2022, go back, look at 2020 and compare it to 2022, and then I've shot some new stuff in 2022, and then I kind of want to carry it over into relating some more scripted stuff in as well, and can I weave myself through all of these themes as well. So that's the next phase in this. So Pre-Existing Freedom has grown into an ecosystem of stories. The first one that was in your film festival sort of launched it, and now it's inspired a lot of work. It's like it's literally a series, in my sort of profile as an artist. It's a time capsule. So the Pre-Existing Freedom period is this sort of time of civil and social unrest in America. And so I'll eventually probably move on to other stuff. But for right now, that's just really, where my head is at. And so I really want to continue to push myself and challenge it. So I've just got to find actors.
You don't always want to be on camera, huh?
No, because I can only do so much.
Yeah, and you can get a lot done behind the camera.
I can get a lot done behind the camera. Exactly. I'm more powerful behind the camera than in front of the camera, in spite of the fact people are always like, "Oh, we love you in front of the camera." But I feel so powerless in front of the camera. I can't do everything I want to do. I feel very, feel very limited. So I want to be able to find other actors and express a lot of this art and thoughts and feelings through others, as well, of all different backgrounds, as well. Do my words work through a transgendered person? Do my words work through someone else that's African American or Latino or Asian or gay or blah blah, women, Jewish people, all that stuff? Can I make that work? That would be fascinating. I'm very interested in that, as well.
Well, tell me, is there I see your backdrop. This is an audio only podcast, so people can't see it, but it shows me tomorrowpictures.com. Is that where someone should go to follow you and learn all about you?
Yes, they should. They should go to tomorrowpictures.com. The motto is, the story is in the telling. And I really believe that. And you can also go to my artist website, which is Fr3deR1cK.com, Frederick.com, as well. And you'll find all sorts of things about me. I do a lot of interviews now. I do a lot of radio. I've been doing more TV. And I continue to really push and be a part of film festivals as well. I have a documentary that's on PBS about an LGBTQ dance craze called J Setting, on a show called If Cities Could Dance. And I did the Atlanta-based episode, and it actually went on to win an Emmy as well. And then I have a documentary that's on Amazon called Counter History's Rock Hill, which is about a 1961 counter sit-in in Rock Hill, South Carolina, which it's all about youthful, peaceful protest as well. And those two pieces are in color. For those of you that have only seen my work in black and white, I do work in color from time to time as well, but those two pieces are in color, and I'm very extraordinarily proud of those as well. And I'm really sort of shepherding and producing my first piece as not the writer and not the director, just the producer. We're making a feature-length film about a young man who is struggling to reconnect with his father after his mother has passed away, as well. So it's more of a family oriented, or family drama. It's a sophisticated family film. It's adult, but it's about fathers and sons, trying to find common ground in order to move forward when the mother is no longer a part of the immediate family dynamic.
Sounds excellent. All right, well, I'll have you send me. I have most of the links, but I'll send you an email and ask for a link.
Yeah, send me an email and I'll update you on everything.
I'll just get it so that I can put everything in the show notes, so that whatever podcatcher people are listening to this on, they can click on the Fr3deR1cK, which they
that gets you everything.
Yeah.
You Google that, boom, everything comes up.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, that's
I'll definitely at least have that in tomorrowpictures.com in the show notes for people to click on and get taken right to the hub.
Sounds great.
And is there any kind of social media I should add in?
Yeah, everything under the sun, all the Fr3deR1cK stuff, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, it's all the same thing. That's
the great thing about coming up with something original, is you were able to grab it everywhere
Exactly. It's really, really, really helpful. And I've been translating this message into the world of sort of the public in general. I've been created a piece called Together ATL, which is all about social awareness and social justice through the eyes of children as well, where they're sort of singing and dancing in this sort of Jesus Christ Superstar meets The Wiz and Sesame Street and Zoom sort of way, which is really cool too. And that is with the Community Foundation of Greater Atlanta as well. So they have been very inspired by the things that I do. Like they liked Pre-Existing Freedom, and so certain groups that are trying to fight the good fight with social justice and things like that sort of appreciate some of these creative concepts that I create, and they say, hey, can you kind of bring that over here with us as well? We like that. How can we make that work as messaging? Because that's one of the big challenges now with a lot of these nonprofits is like, how do they upgrade and update their messages now? Because, they've been very challenged too because of the conservative right and how dismissed they are. And so they've got to up their game. And so I've gotten a lot more inquiries from organizations like that. I'm going to do another documentary about the immigration of Asian Americans in Atlanta, specifically the Burmese people into Atlanta. And so that's also another pay gig. Like I'm getting gigs now and being paid to take this messaging to the masses through some of these organizations as well, which is now this is inspiring me to create my own organization too, to be inspired. And so I'm using inspired by my grandmother and my uncle. My grandmother was an educator. She was the one I told you about that emigrated from Memphis to Chicago, was a great woman. And then her son, who was LGBTQ and unfortunately passed away of HIV prematurely in life. And so their surname was Jones. My mother's maiden name is Jones. So it's going to be called the Jones Foundation. And so I'm going to start to do some things like that in that space too. And I never thought I was going to end up in the nonprofit world, but the creative work is bringing me into that space as well, which I'm finding to be a fascinating journey. So this piece, Pre-Existing Freedom, it's changed my life. It's made me a different person. Before Pre-Existing Freedom, I wasn't doing nonprofit, and I wasn't, on the radar with a lot of these other organizations as well. And suddenly now I am. And now I'm seeing a greater purpose. So I care even less about working on the next episode of a Netflix series. I totally don't care now. It's amazing, I have no interest in Marvel movies and all of that other stuff. I don't aspire to it. I got a lot of friends who do.
You have lived through a fascinating time in what has become a very important city.
Yeah.
Because I mean, my God, I guess it really is impossible to be in the arts in Atlanta and not have this Hollywood influx have touched the fabric of life.
Completely changed everything. Game changer. It's Atlanta has been put on the global map in a way that they had never anticipated. They were trying so hard for it to be the Olympics or their sporting teams or their hip hop industry. And nope, it's going to be because of geopolitics.
And Ted Turner having CNN there.
And Ted Turner having CNN. They've tried so hard to commercialize this town. Yeah. And now this town is going to be a turnkey city. And as we move forward with humanity, which is what Dr. King had long advocated for and predicted, because he's from here, and he lies in state here as well. And, the truth does set you free. And Dr. King was right. And all of these commercialized carpetbaggers were wrong.
Well, that feels like a good spot to wrap it up.
Yes.
Thank you so much. This was a wonderful talk.
Yes.
If no one said it to you, you don't have time for it. You're way too busy.
Mm-hmm.
But damn, you should have a podcast too.
I like coming on yours. Yours is
you know
this
what?
is great.
I'm happy to do. We should do it like quarterly or something if you
My
want.
pleasure. I'm totally down. You got it.
Won't run out of stuff to talk about.
No, and I'm sure there'll be more going on.
Always more. And I'm delighted to hear of the fantastic effects that Pre-Existing Freedom has had for you. That it has not just opened doors, but brought you to nonprofits and
Yes.
other things. That's just wonderful to hear, because
Yeah.
you can imagine, as a festival programmer, just completely devoted to indie films that people are making from their hearts for the right reasons, instead of, we've used the word Marvel 100 times in this podcast, and the truth is, like, that's solely commercial, no purpose other than to make money. And I know pretty much almost every film in our festival, the person made it because they wanted to express something, and they knew they weren't going to get their money back. So right. It's a different beast. So to hear that someone's work led to really great things in their life is just that is just the best news of the day. I'm gonna be in a better mood hopefully for more than one day.
Yes, let's make it sustainable. How about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
All right, Frederick. Well, we already talked about the .coms and whatnot, and I promise everyone I will copy and paste that into the show notes for this. And if people go to discoverindiefilm.com, this episode will be there forever with those links. And by the way, I think I neglected to say in the introduction, because it's so much fun to talk to you, that Pre-Existing Freedom, this Discover Indie Film podcast, gave birth to a TV series on Amazon Prime Video called Discover Indie Film. And Pre-Existing Freedom will be in season 7, which I believe probably going to launch January 2023.
Great.
Next month.
Great.
We're talking in August. So in September, season 6 is going to come out, and I love that series. What I said about indie film with the festival, same is true of the TV series. Every work in it is made by a person who just needed to create, and didn't sit down, and wasn't a committee at a studio saying what'll make us the most money. It was an artist who wanted to create. So if people would be so kind, go to Amazon Prime Video, type in Discover Indie Film. The show is not free anymore. We used to be free included with Prime, but Prime didn't like sending us money every month without charging the public. So now it's 99 cents an episode or $7.99 a season. And it's their servers. I actually do understand the business model. I do. So
yeah.
As much as I know we all love to go on Netflix and Amazon and HBO Max and just watch the stuff that's included for free, I would mention that Discover Indie Film, for $8, you get 20 to 25 short films from the festival circuit that are just wonderful works made by people who made them for the right reasons. So $8 for 20 plus films, it's not the worst deal I ever heard of.
No, I've had worse deals in bars when I get my tab.
I know, when you compare the $8, I guess that is a beer. So
that's a deal. These days, you can't get an $8 drink anywhere anymore.
No, you can't. Hey, by the way, it's 3 hours. They average 3 to 3.5 hours per season. So $8 for 3 hours, it's better than it's not a bad deal. It's not a bad deal. Exactly. I wish I wasn't so apologetic about the fact that Amazon made us start charging for the show. It was beautiful when it was included with Prime, because we grew and grew, and the audience got up to like 10,000 unique viewers a week.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That proved that there actually is a public that wants to watch films like yours and narratives and everything. So anyway, I've just gone on way long about this Discover Indie Film thing. If people want to learn more about the show or the podcast, just go to discoverindiefilm.com. And on all the social media platforms, it's at DIFWins. And yes, Sherman Oaks Film Festival had Pre-Existing Freedom in its 2021 edition. If you want to learn more about that festival that we hold every November, just go to ShermanOaksFF.com, and it's at ShermanOaksFF on social media. Again, a lovely in-person event where all the work is from the hearts of artists. And there is a sister festival every June called Film Invasion Los Angeles. People can look it up on filminvasionla.com, and it's at Film Invasion LA on social media. And now I have done my my promoting of that stuff. So I'll thank Frederick one more time for doing this chat.
Yeah, my pleasure. Anytime.
And thank you everyone for listening.
You got it. You take care of yourself, brother.
Thank you.
All right. See ya.